Good morning, members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, members of the media, and those following via social media. Welcome to this public meeting number 23 of today, August 31st, 2022. I would like to give a special welcome to the Minister of General Affairs, Prime Minister Sylvia Jacobs, and her support staff, Ms. Weeks and Mr. Plantain. We have established a quorum of 12 members. Please let's stand for a moment of silence. I've received notice of absence from MP William Marlin. Is there any member of Parliament that wish to have the floor for notifications? MP Christophe Emmanuel, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to everyone, Honorable Prime Minister, her support staff, and everyone else who's watching. Madam Chair, I've taken notice that the Prime Minister sent the note yesterday with the answers for the questions we have asked in the CC, and this is something I've been talking about, Madam Chair Lady, the time frame in which we does receive these answers to peruse and go over for an upcoming meeting. Madam Chair Lady, again, I'm not putting it on the Prime Minister, but I'm now asking again urgently the request we made for the meetings coming up on Friday pertaining to the information, investigation, and the documents. Friday, today is Wednesday. This is like the third time I'm asking for those documents. Madam Chair, it's not documents that have to be made up. It's not documents that has to go anywhere. They're documents that are there already, Madam Chair Lady. They're booked in, they're there already. And I'm asking for them again for the meeting on Friday. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel. I can attest for sure that just a few minutes ago, I too just reminded the SG to look into the request that we have tried to, so that we can have it before Friday, and she assured me that she's looking into it, and she will get back to us. Hopefully by the end of the day, I'll know more on the request. I see that MP Westcott Williams would like to have the floor as well for notifications. MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and good morning. Good morning to my colleagues. Good morning to everyone who's tuned into this meeting. A good morning and a word of welcome to the Prime Minister and her entourage. Allow me during notifications for this public meeting to applaud the recent activity coordinated by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, and that was the health exposition and all that went with it. I also want to congratulate all the organizations and participants who were part of that event this past Saturday. I say this to introduce and also commend and support the health testing that is going to be taking place starting this Saturday and then followed by breast cancer screenings and health screenings during the month of September, October, and November. And I want to encourage persons to make use of, one, the screening for prostate cancer that is taking place this Saturday. I encourage everyone falling in the category of above 40 years, etc., to, if at all possible, make use of this free screening. Secondly, as I mentioned, in the month of September, the breast cancer screening and other health screenings are also going to be taking place. For that, one has to make an appointment, and I want to encourage our women and girls to also make use of this. And I stress this point because I have been discussing and brainstorming with the director of the SZV regarding mandatory health screening for certain illnesses. As we know it, for example, and it's much more than only in the Netherlands. And I know that probably the reaction to this will be, We will get there because we're working on our health information system and our social registry. I am a proponent that while we're working on these big programs and these big ideas, and have been for the last couple of years, we need to look at the incremental issues that can be taken out. And looking, Madam Chair Lady, at so many of our people affected by these different illnesses and oftentimes only found and diagnosed in a later stage, we need to look at mandatory population screening. I want to commend the organizations that over the years have been contributing to this screening, but I think if we can get it as a sort of a mandatory screening, that it will definitely benefit not only health costs, but also the quality of life for many of our people. I thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. Next, in notification round, we have MP Rolando Bryson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you, my colleague members of Parliament, the Griffier, the Honorable Prime Minister, her support staff, and those viewing. Madam Chair, I wanted to express congratulations to St. Martin as a whole, and especially from an economic perspective, the news that the JW Marriott has announced that they will be coming to St. Martin in the former location of where the Westin was. Madam Chair, those number of rooms, 230 rooms, would actually bring us back for the first time to the number of rooms that this country has had before Hurricane Irma. Madam Chair, in addition to that, we also have word that the Planet Hollywood Resort is planning to start construction early 2023, as well as the IHG resorts in Indigo Bay that will be operating there. With the news, in addition to that, that Hilton has also taken over what was once known as the Royal Palm Resort. We now will have the top 3 resort companies in the world finally in St. Martin. Madam Chair, when I look at the numbers of those plans, you're talking about 1,800 construction jobs and post-construction additional 700 permanent jobs, which if you go in line with the policy of the Minister of VSR in terms of the work opportunities, we understand that much of that will go to locals. Madam Chair, I think it's very good news and much needed news for the economy and for business people in St. Martin, and of course for the labor market to know that over the next year and 2 years, we will see a great surge in labor, in economic activity. And Madam Chair, investors of this proportion do not come to countries that they do not believe that they have confidence in the economy and confidence in the way that the government is moving forward. So while there is a lot to improve with a lot of different things that this Parliament will be debating over time, I think it's important to give hope to the labor market as well as the economy of St. Martin that we are moving forward, and that the rest of the world is looking at St. Martin as a very, very good place to come and do big business. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. Next, we have MP Angelique Remou.
Pleasant good morning to you, Madam Chair Lady, of course to my colleagues here in the hall, and of course to the Prime Minister and her support staff, and of course to the people of St. Martin. Keeping on the positive notes, Madam Chair Lady, I would like to also extend congratulations to not only our brothers and sisters in Curacao on their Little League team doing so well, but I also want to keep it right here home. We had 4 youngsters that play cricket for St. Martin that were chosen to represent St. Martin along with the Leeward Islands team. And they went abroad and they played in this team with other Caribbean islands, and they became the champs of the Leeward Islands Cricket Association. These 4 young men, I would like to call their names: Nathan Edwards, who is a great prospect for cricket for St. Martin, as well as Shamikio Landaford, Amarius Harris, and Michael Palmer are doing excellent work in the field of cricket and are also being looked at for the West Indies team. So I want to congratulate these young men in doing excellent in the under-19 category for cricket. I thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, members of Parliament, for your notifications. Let's go over now to the agenda point, which we have today for the public meeting, and that is the National Ordinance amending the temporary national ordinance COVID-19 cuts implementation condition for civil servants in the connection with the phased reduction of the COVID-19 cuts employment condition for civil servant. Parliamentary year 2021-2022, number 161, under incoming document 1123, parliamentary year 2021-2022, dated July 7th, 2022. Parliament received a national ordinance amending the temporary national ordinance COVID-19 cuts employment conditions for civil servants in connection with the phased reduction of the COVID-19 cuts employment conditions for civil servants. Again, this can be found under incoming document 1123 on July 7, 2022. The Central Committee meeting was held on July 8, 2022 on the subject matter, during which members of Parliament posed their questions and ministers answered these questions. A report has been made on the deliberation in the Central Committee meeting and was sent to the government as well as the members. The government answered this report with the so-called nota naar aanleiding van het verslag. I would like to give the floor to the Prime Minister, Ms. Silvera Jacobs, for some opening remarks and presentation. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good morning to you. Good morning to the Griffier, the members of Parliament, my support staff. Good morning to all those who are also supporting that are not in the room. Of course, the support staff of Parliament. Good morning, and once again to the people of St. Martin. I'm thankful to be here, and I acknowledge that indeed the nota naar aanleiding van het verslag did leave late. Of course, I have to vet and approve before, and I was quite caught up. So I must say the staff did their due diligence, but it is literally my fault. So my heartfelt apologies for the late sending of this report. I'd also like to take the time, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, to congratulate the Ministry of ECYS for another great expo. This has been ongoing since 2015 and has grown by leaps and bounds. Over the 2 years preceding, we were not able to have a face-to-face or live expo, so it was done virtually, whereby organizations throughout the community could make their craft known to the public of St. Martin, so that parents could know where their children could be positively and actively involved, as well as helped. So health has come on board this year, so culture and sport has been going on for some time. So congratulations to the ministry, congratulations for expanding, and continue to go to work, because I don't think after that expo, people can say that there is nothing to do for your children or for adults or even for seniors. And I was happy to see the senior citizens out in full force, as well as many health geared businesses. We know that that is something we are promoting as a country. And I echo the sentiments that we make the effort to get tested. Prevention and early detection is the best way for us to fight our diseases. The diseases that are prevalent throughout our community, we have seen an upsurge, especially since COVID-19, that has opened up underlying issues for people who didn't even know they had them. So I'm asking you to stay abreast of your health issues, manage what you are putting in your bodies, and of course, continue to move for health. Madam Chair, I'd like to congratulate also our 4 champions returning this week: Nathan Edwards, Shamiko Landeford, Amarius Harris, and Michael Palmer. St. Martin is truly proud of these homegrown youngsters under 19 who took part in the cricket championship abroad over the summer ending just this week. We were sharing their successes, but who could have imagined that a few years ago it was 1 in the name of Casey Carty, and now there are 4. There are others as well who are out there, and so I continue to encourage their families to share their successes so that we as government and all within our society can give them the praises that are due to them, as we spend so much time crying down our youth, and any opportunity to big them up, I am 100% there. Congratulations, continued success on your journeys for to professionalize yourselves, as I see you have a great future. Madam Chair, I was also like to say that MP Marlin I would like to wish him safe journeys, that he is actually on his way back to St. Martin. And so we pray that he arrives safely and will be soon with us, as well as to all those who are abroad for medical reasons and are sometimes alone and dealing with their challenges. I wish them all much strength. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my short announcements that I were able to make with your indulgence, and therefore I go into now the public meeting opening statements. On July 9th, Madam Chair, during the Central Committee meeting, I was here before you to handle the draft law amendment that we have before us. At the time, we had just ended the negotiation with the State Secretary pertaining to the proposed conditions for the alleviation of the 12.5%. Although the Netherlands did reformulate four of the 8 conditions, not having them as hard conditions, but things to focus on, 4 still remained that are obligatory. As you know, these 4 remaining conditions, Madam Chair, were considered to be additional for us as government and also unnecessary, because the initial conditions for instituting the 12.5% cut were no longer valid or applicable. The solidarity principle was no longer needed. We were implementing and are still implementing the country packages. We have passed the laws on the increase of pension. Those were conditions back then. And we've passed the law that we are currently trying to amend, as well as the LNT, and that for the political persons. We've done all that we promised to do to be able to get to this point. And so with the changing circumstances, Madam Chair, we felt it imperative to also give necessary relief to the civil servants and others affected. Although the year before we were still receiving liquidity support, for this year, Madam Chair, 2022, and up until present, we have not received any liquidity support. Not to mention that there are now one of the 4 remaining conditions that is an attempt to restrict Parliament's powers and would continue to solidify a practice that St. Martin has spoken out quite strongly against throughout this process, as we constantly encounter this when dealing with the Ministry of BZK. And that is that BZK is making the approval in the Kingdom Council of Ministers dependent on the adoption of the amendments to the LNT by our Parliament. This, again, is restrictive and limiting, and I believe that we must take, let's call it this, discussion to the next level where you as Parliament have it at the IPCO. We have seen that although Aruba agreed explicitly for these conditions, whilst Curaçao and St. Martin did not, that the very same conditions has caused much uproar in Aruba, as the LNT adopted by the Aruba contains amendments from their parliament, which are not in line with the wishes of The Hague, and has added fuel to the fire for Aruba. Will St. Martin meet the same fate as Aruba if and when our LNT is handled and Parliament sees fit to make amendments? As I explained previously, Madam Chair, St. Martin could not wait for the fulfillment of these conditions in order to provide some relief to our civil servants. That was within our immediate purview. The others fall within the LNT, and hopefully when that is handled, we can also move forward with them. But our initial step was to give this relief. It became increasingly obvious that many persons were requesting advances to be able to pay, whether it was for materials related to the opening of the school year, or whether it was insurances that they usually have due around the time when they would collect these funds, or whether it was to prepare for the coming hurricane season. Madam Chair, it became blatantly clear with all those requests that are, as a matter of fact, still coming in based on cost of living as well, that we could not continue to subject the civil servants to this any longer and lobbied to have this 12.5% cut removed. While we did get an agreement that it can be afgebouwd, there is still several conditions to do so. I have sent you, the members of parliament, a letter on the results of those discussions, and I even came to parliament in June on this point. Thus, in keeping with what I have continued to promote, we are striving to build a country that we love, St. Martin, which affords opportunities and maximum growth, where family is at the core of our society, and that we are strengthening each other to teach the high morals and the cultural values, to teach character and integrity and promote this, and based on our love for ourselves, wishes for the best for ourselves, but also for our fellow man and this country, thereby motivating every person to contribute to the development of St. Martin. So together with the council, Madam Chair, members of parliament, we decided that we had to look for a solution. The solution is here before you. We sat with the unions. We came to an agreement on a temporary measure until we could actually get the law passed, and therefore we are here now. We are still living up to the 12.5% conditions, and we will continue to do so until this law is passed. So this law will actually make it possible. I did not, nor did this government act illegally, as the National Ordinance on Accountability provides a necessary space for payment and a necessary amendment with retroactive implementation once adopted. And this will smooth over any legal hurdles that are purely theoretical in nature and does not negatively impact persons falling under the scope. Together with the council, we sought a workable solution, as I mentioned before, to benefit the community in general and the civil servants in particular. This is at a time of great uncertainty in the world, where economic challenges are facing everyone, including The Hague. And we need to and should ensure that we provide the necessary support to these people who are the pillars of our functioning, the civil servants, as when they suffer, we all suffer. It is time that when the cost of goods continue to shift from minute to minute, especially upwards, it is imperative that we take into consideration and apply policies that will benefit the people, amend and make changes so that we can actually impact the lives of the individuals. And so I'm here today to ensure that the hard-earned monies that these persons have received will not be in jeopardy. They will not be asked to give it back, nor will they be asked to give in those days that are being held until this legislation is passed. I ask for Parliament's support in this and remind that this will not hamper the execution of the 12.5% reductions on the benefits. This is being maintained in another form, as I just explained. And the Minister of Finance, for sure, when he can return for the answering of questions, who I forgot to mention, could not be here today for the questions, but will definitely be here when we have to respond due to unforeseen emergencies within the Ministry of Finance. And he will be able to further expound on this. In fact, we recently sent a letter of explanation to the CFT pertaining to how the adjustments were made. What is important is that we allow this relief for the civil servants as a starting point, and that members of Parliament have all championed this. And of course, we're happy to be able to bring this amendment forward. Of course, the next steps would be to deal with the ones that fall under the LNT and to actually work towards the complete reduction. And of course, to do that, listening to other opening remarks by members of Parliament, it's good to know that we see a future where our economy will continue to bounce back, and we're coming into the high peak of the hurricane season, but also soon to start the high season to see the flow of economic development in St. Martin increase as well, hopefully which will trickle down to government and help us to be able to meet our obligations. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those were my opening remarks for now, and I await further discussion with the members of Parliament.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. I look to the speakers list. We are now going into the first round. And in the first round, the allotted speaking time is 20 minutes in the first round and 10 minutes in the second round. But thus far, there are no members of Parliament that wish to speak in the first round. So with that, I would then, was about to draw a conclusion, but I'll allow MP Westcott Williams to come in and sign in. I would now like to turn the floor over to MP Sarah Westcott Williams. MP Westcott Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and good morning once again. Madam Chair Lady, I want to thank the Prime Minister for her introductory remarks on this matter, and I concur with the statements of my colleague, MP Emmanuel, with respect to receiving the responses from the government on the queries and questions by members of Parliament in the Central Committee meeting on this law. In these answers, or from these answers, I have been able to deduce by the government's response that subsidized school boards paid out vacation pay in 2020 and 2021. In accordance with the law that is currently on the books, as far as the cutting of benefits from semi-government institutions, so not the law before us today, which deals with the civil servants, the one dealing with the governmental and semi-governmental institutions such as school boards and the like, according to that law, which has not yet been touched by government since approved by Parliament and condoned by the Constitutional Court, the minister responsible for these institutions would have had to publish how every institution implemented the 12.5% cut according to the law that needed to be published. So, while the government is claiming that the institutions such as school boards and the like could have applied the 12.5% cut, which according to law they had to do in the way that they see fit, which is a fact, it needed to be published. Members of Parliament, as well as the population in general, needed to know how each and every institution falling under that law applied the 12.5% cut to their personnel cost. So, since the government has responded that subsidized school boards, and I quote, subsidized school boards paid out vacation pay in 2020 and 2021. Does the government have any idea what then, since it was not vacation pay that was cut by the subsidized school boards, then what did the individual school boards and other foundations cut to comply with the law of 12.5% taken from the benefits of their employees. I took note of a response that included something to the effect of, school boards are different. They have applied the law differently. For example, some school boards, it has been stated, would give car allowances, uniforms, all of this has been stated. So very specifically, my question is, how have the different school boards, if they have, applied the 12.5% cut? Has this been publicized as required by law under the auspices of the relevant ministers? And if so, where is this publication? So, what did school boards and the like cut to comply with the law as put forward by the government to cut the benefits of all government and semi-government institutions? I was under the impression that the CFT's advice regarding this matter was a positive advice. That seems not to be the case, because, in the words of State Secretary Van Huffelen, CFT has not advised on this matter. So, question, what is CFT's latest advice on either these cuts or the budget 2022, amended or not? I was one of those who in the Central Committee meeting asked if the government did not consider it prudent that if they, for whatever their reasons, as outlined before and again here this morning, felt it necessary to go against a law on the books, if the government does not consider it prudent that Parliament would be officially informed. Not come in a meeting and say, well, I think we're going to do this or do that, but officially to be informed. Did not the government think that that would be a right way? Once that decision was taken, we are going to pay out vacation allowance, while the government itself proposed that vacation allowance be cut as part of the 12.5%. The government continues to refer to the accountability ordinance as their basis for deviating from the rule that only Parliament can deviate from the budget. Only Parliament can deviate from the budget. That's the rule. One of the most significant rights of Parliament is that of budget. So it must be understood that deviation from that is a very exceptional clause. The reference constantly by the governability ordinance to say we can deviate from the budget right of Parliament to approve and amend Parliament is erroneous. Completely. Is there an exception clause in the accountability ordinance? There is. But in that same exception clause, it is stated under what circumstances. And it doesn't leave it up for the interpretation of government to decide its national interest. Absolutely not. Article 50 does not leave it up to the government to decide we're going to deviate now or we're not going to deviate. This is national interest or it's not. It's not up to them to decide. So the whole rationale behind the accountability ordinance is flawed. The rationale of the government is flawed. Then I need the government to explain. The government said Once this proposed amendment is approved by Parliament, the vacation allowance will for government not be part of the 12.5% cut with retroactive effect. With regard to the vacation days, the idea is to replace the vacation allowance as part of the 12.5% cut with, amongst other things, and I guess this is an error in the answers, because it states, as part of the 12.5% cut with, amongst other things, an increase of vacation days. And I think the increase part is an error, because what I understand from the government is that vacation pay will be paid out, and on the other hand, you'll have a decrease in vacation days, not an increase. So the government is even saying, for this purpose, it is proposed to increase the current covering of 1.2% of the 12.5% to 4.3% of the 12.5%. So where is that taking place, is my question. Where is the increase that will be from 1 to 2% to 4.3 relative to vacation days? Where is that change? It's not in the law before us right now. The government continued in response to a question to state that with respect to the reference to government about the other things that government is doing to alleviate the social circumstances and social issues by many, that the government has recently approved, or the Minister of TIAT recently approved, a policy on agriculture. And the government continues to state in its answers, the policy document outlines the next steps, which includes the necessary legislative amendments. So, in the view of the government, there will be legislative amendments as a result of the policy on agriculture. Could the government be a little more forthcoming in with this information? So what are we going to legislate with respect to agriculture? Just an idea. The law might not be there yet, but what can we and are we considering to legislate? I ask, in the same context of agriculture and the government's boasting of supporting, and I ask with respect to, mind you, these were in my questions, Mr. Wyatt in St. Peter's. In response, the government sort of indicated they did not know what I was referring to. Well, very specifically, has the issue with the land situation for Mr. Wyatt been addressed and dealt with? If not, why not? If so, how? The government states, one of the conditions, as mentioned, is the draft on the top incomes, which is currently being discussed in Parliament. In addition, the Minister of Finance is working diligently to get a favorable advice from CFT to the MRI. Hence, my question earlier. So not all the conditions have been met as yet. Yet, the government is asking Parliament to approve this law when clearly the conditions have not been met. Government statement. But you're asking Parliament approve this law, but we haven't really met the conditions to make it possible for what is in this law to be effected. I referred earlier to this issue of Article 50 of the Accountability Ordinance. I would really, really like to know and understand this issue of the publication of the cutting of the salaries and benefits under the law, the next law, because that law is not with Parliament. The law regarding the cutting of the 12.5% from government and semi-government institutions is not in Parliament. The government has indicated that they have held correspondence. When I ask about this publication, the government has indicated that they have held, and I quote, held correspondence. So the relevant minister held correspondence with the different institutions. What does that mean, and how does it relate to the requirement that how each and every school board and other institution apply the 12.5% cut they needed to make that known? So how holding correspondence, what does that mean? The government responded that the agreement with the unions was that a swap will take place when needed. The agreement is that in the last quarter of the year, that government and the unions will meet again and discuss the swap. At this current moment, the swap is not included in this draft amendment. So is there an agreement on a swap, or is there not an agreement on a swap? How does the swap for vacation days, how does that affect, how did it and how will it affect, for example, the teachers? And if this law does not include the swap, then we come back to the part of not having received the approval to deviate from the 12.5% cut. The government, in its answers, promised a nota van wijziging to amend the date because, indeed, according to government, the date was wrong and the adjustment would have come with a nota van wijziging. And my question is, where is that note of amendment or nota van wijziging? Then the government found a very creative answer in terms of, is it in the budget? Paying out vacation allowance is in the budget, according to the government. When asked how, the government said, the amount for vacation payment of $6.5 million is included in the budgeted amount for personnel expenses of the budget 2022. And this is because, according to the government, the budgeted amount for personnel expenses is $217 million, while the projected current actual expenses are $202 million. And the government continues, this gap is caused by budgeted but not filled vacancies. Having taken note of that, how is the government, or how has the government dealt with CFT's advice on the 2022 budget to lower the budget of the country? How has the government dealt with that? Government has indicated that St. Martin is projected to need liquidity support up to an amount of 41 million guilders. Can the government provide a specification as to how it came to the amount of 41 million guilders needed for liquidity for 2022? The government stated, during a meeting held on March 23, 2022, with the civil servants, unions, representatives, and the government, the unions were presented with the plans to which they asked for time to discuss with their respective members. On May 25, 2022, the respective unions' representatives submitted their responses to government, and as such, have included their responses which can corroborate the agreements made. These responses have not been included, Madam Chair Lady. So my question is, please provide. Madam Chair Lady, I thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. Next on the speakers list, we have MP George Pantaflet. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, good afternoon to the Chair, Honourable Prime Minister and support staff, my colleagues in Parliament. Madam Chair, I believe I was away when this meeting was held, when the meeting was held concerning this law. But, Madam Chair, I just want to congratulate or thank the Prime Minister, support staff, for doing what's in the interest of the people of St. Martin. Madam Chair, some might say this is not related, but I like to look at what's happening in other countries besides St. Martin. Carrefour CAO, and Carrefour, not Carrefour St. Martin, but Carrefour France. Inflation crisis forces new frugality on French consumers. Cost-conscious French consumers are ditching fish, buying cheaper meat, and snubbing organic food to save money on their shopping, the head of Europe's largest food retailer and shoppers said on Tuesday. Carrefour Chief Executive Alexander Bompard said economists' debates about when inflation would peak were futile, and what mattered was consumers' new entrenched penny-pinching approach to shopping. You make choices in favor of the lowest prices sales. I'm not going to buy beef, but the cheapest pork. End of quote. Madam Chair, why did I mention this? What the government is doing is ensuring that as much as possible, the purchasing power of the consumers are increased. That's what it should all be about, Madam Chair. We know exactly what happened in the Constitutional Court, what decision was taken and so on. We are aware of that. Today, Madam Chair, government is asking for the approval in order to ensure that we continue to do that which is in the best interest of the people of St. Martin. Madam Chair, the International Monetary Fund, and I always say no friend of mine, stated in one of the daily newspapers that they agree that it's time that this 12.5% cut that has been placed on the operating expense of government be abolished. And I think that's the direction we should go into, Madam Chair. So, as I said, I was not here for the meeting when it took place. I think it was a CC, I'm not sure. I was not present. But I think we should be very cautious as to what is and what is not important. And every decision that one takes, Madam Chair, should be in order to improve the livelihood of our people. So, Madam Chair, again, what is happening all over the world is also happening in St. Martin. We are experiencing these things. Ukraine, Russia war is affecting us all. There are persons who have taken to the streets, Madam Chair, in some countries. We in St. Martin are fortunate, and I believe it is important that we do what is in the best interest of the people. So I want to applaud the government's effort, and let us continue to find solutions as we move forward and ensure that we don't depend anymore on any external financial assistance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Ponteflet. Next on the speakers list, we have MP Christophe Emmanuel. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady. And again, Madam Chair, let me thank the Prime Minister and her staff for the answers that they sent in relations to my questions. I don't have much questions in the public meeting here today. Nonetheless, I'm still a bit sort of confused, Madam Chair, in this amendment, in this law. And here's the reason for that. I would like to ask the Honorable Prime Minister, Madam Chair, if she can give a definition in terms of what education personnel mean. Because, Madam Chair, in the beginning of the law is made mention of education personnel. And it's a specific reason why I'm asking this question. Also, Madam Chair, can the Prime Minister give a definition on what is government organs? What is considered as government organs? I would like to know, Madam Chair, if the subsidized schools in St. Martin is considered government organs. I would like to know. And here's the reason why I'm asking this question, Madam Chair. Because in one of the answers, the Prime Minister gave sort of the reasoning why the vacation pay is paid out to some and not the others. And she made mention that the Minister of Education give a reason that 3 was paid out and this one was paid out back then and yada yada. That was the whole story. However, as it is today, Madam Chair, the subsidized school teacher still hasn't received their vacation pay. Now, in the beginning of the law, it is made mention of education personnel. I am asking, Madam Chair, through you, to the Honorable Prime Minister, does the subsidized school teachers fall under education personnel? Because if they do, then, Madam Chair, that means the board of the subsidized schools are absolved today in terms of paying the vacation pay. It means with this law, that the educational board of the subsidized school, Madam Chair, should be paying the vacation pay today. They should be paying it. But then again, Madam Chair, I am saying to the Honorable Prime Minister, and maybe I have it wrong, but there seems to be a contradiction because in one of the 3 laws, Madam Chair, the subsidized schools fall under not being able to do it. That they can't do it. They can't make the payments. And this is the reason why the subsidized schools have been asking the government to give me some sort of documentation that relieves me of any type, anything, Madam Chair, that can come back and take me to court for making these payments, seeing that there's a law. So I am asking through you to the Honorable Prime Minister, does this one here, does this one absolve, does this one wipes out the subsidized school boards that falls under not being able to pay the vacation pay, Madam Chair, of the first law that was passed in Parliament? This law that the Prime Minister is bringing here today to pass. Does it do that? That's why I'm asking the question, because in the beginning of the law, it is made mention of education personnel. Education personnel. So I'm asking the question. The subsidized school teachers, do they fall under, or are they considered education personnel? Madam Chair, listen to what I'm saying good, because there seems to be a conflict. In the first laws, the 3 that we passed, Madam Chair, there was a list of organizations that are subject to the 12.5% cut. And the subsidized schools, Madam Chair, they are one of them. That today, they're not paying out the vacation pay because they are saying to the government, look, listen, give me a letter because there's a law. But Madam Chair Lady, in this law now that the Prime Minister is bringing, in the beginning of it, it is made mention of education personnel. That's why I'm asking the question, Madam Chair Lady. The subsidized school teachers, do they fall under, or are they considered education personnel? What's the definition? I need to know, Madam Chair Lady. What is also considered government organs, Madam Chair? And does subsidized schools fall under government organs? Are they considered part of it, Madam Chair Lady? Because again, it is for the subsidized school boards that have been asking for this letter and cannot get it. And as much as the Minister of Education tried to explain that it's not discrimination, Madam Chair, as today as it is, once you pay one set of teachers and not the other set of teachers, that's discrimination. Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel. It appears that MP Emmanuel, MP Bryson. Sorry, I didn't update my list. MP Bryson, I see that you're next on the speakers list. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, good afternoon again to one and all. Madam Chair, this, I think I'm going to have to repeat a little bit of what I touched on in the Central Committee meeting of this debate on this piece of legislation by starting on this question of the legality of the government being able to do such payouts, etc. Because, Madam Chair, you know, if it's one thing I'm learning a lot about law and why judges exist or why tribunals, arbitration, etc. exist, is because the fact is there are multiple interpretations and it's ultimately up to the decision maker to decide, hey, this is what this means. And in some cases, that can be very complex. I admit, sometimes you see a law and there's a lot of wiggle room. But in other cases, Madam Chair, to me, you read it and it's quite verbatim. Who is allowed to do what? What are the steps you're supposed to take? What are you supposed to do? What is legal? What is not legal? And Madam Chair, to me, Article 50 is one of those laws. It is very, very clear and direct. Madam Chair, if you look at Article 50, and I'm referring to the Accountability Ordinance, this has the situations where deviations can be made. And if you go to the explanatory memorandum of that law, that entire long, I think it's like 7 or 8 different paragraphs, the explanatory memorandum has just one thing to say about Article 50, and it states as follows. Article 50 does provide for limited possibilities for derogation without prior parliamentary approval. That's what the entire Article 50 is about. If there's a situation where the government finds itself under 2 circumstances, national interest or an acute situation, it's A or B, okay? Without parliamentary approval, what steps do they have to follow? So, Madam Chair, just then to ask the question to confirm, if Article 50 talks about national interest and acute situations, and Article 50 explanatory memorandum is saying without parliamentary approval, is it the parliament that still need to decide what is national interest at that point? So indeed, who decides national interest? It's not the parliament in this case, because that's what the law says. Is it a civil servant? Is it the IMF, CFT, Holland? Well, Madam Chair, let's look and see what the law says as to who is the entity or the person or the group that decides that. Madam Chair, it states here, Section 4, after the Council of Ministers has agreed that an urgent need as referred to in the first paragraph under B, which is this acute situation, so they're already identifying the Council of Ministers, they are identifying that they identify that need, has arisen, the necessary funds may be made available in the sub-function unforeseen proposal of the minister concerned by the Minister of Finance, expenses or the estimate for contingencies for investments if adequate. Madam Chair, in Section 3 it says, insofar as the assessment as to whether there is an acute national interest has not been assigned to another body in a statutory regulation, it falls to the Prime Minister. Parliament will be informed as soon as possible of the resulting financial consequences as soon as possible after the relevant decision, together with proposals for mitigating them. Madam Chair, in the answers to the question, because I asked this question, I asked the Prime Minister at the time, what steps were taken to fulfill and inform the members of Parliament at the time? And Madam Chair, I recall it was, I don't know if we just completely forgot about that meeting that took place, and the answer is actually provided to the members of Parliament. It was mentioned in a previous meeting, and especially after this function mentioned, oh sorry, no, that's the wrong one. Let me go to the right answer. Here we go. So many answers and questions. Here we go. Indeed, at the time, this legislation was very important as it was a condition for receiving liquidity support. That was the situation then and now. Now we are here in the reality where we see that these cuts are no longer sustainable for the civil servants. As such, we cannot allow the civil servant to continue to feel the pinch. That is in response to my question about the meeting that took place, where that statement I just read was given to the members of Parliament, albeit in closed door, but it was given to the members of Parliament. There was a reporting from the government that this is in the pipeline. Before the recess, we had a Central Committee meeting where it was brought to Parliament as soon as possible, and the identification of an urgent need was established. And I posed the question, maybe to my colleagues, does anyone here disagree with this being of urgent interest? I can tell you an entity that does find it's of urgent interest. And Madam Chair, that would be the IMF. Because just 2 weeks ago, the IMF came out with what is called the IMF Executive Board concludes the 2022 Article 4 consultation. This is a very specific consultation that is done with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Curaçao, and St. Martin. So they all meet together, and I have to thank MP George Pantofet for reminding me of this one, where the three countries meet together and they say, listen, give me your input. What do you think about the wage cuts, the economy, and so on? The Netherlands weighed in on this, and let me tell you what they said. What they found, Madam Chair, with regard specifically to the fiscal policies should be calibrated to achieve growth-friendly fiscal consolidation to support the most vulnerable while placing public debt firmly on a downward path. Okay? Let me get this part. And Madam Chair, they refer, for example, of implementing the supply side of governance reform envisaged in the Landsverorde, such as improving the business climate, the functioning of the labor market, and improving the regulatory frameworks would be key for supporting recovery, and these appear to be on track. Oh, so the Netherlands is sitting in this meeting with the IMF together with representatives of Curaçao, St. Martin, and saying, so Holland, what do you think about this? Is this correct? Yeah, it appears to be on track. Demi says so. It's the IMF saying so, with the Netherlands present. And then, when they talk of the issue of the wages, they say here, the public wage bill freeze could be eased in light of the inflation shock and should eventually be replaced by a comprehensive reform focused on productivity and competitive wages. Netherlands is sitting in this room, Madam Chair, and are being told by the IMF, take the necessary steps to phase out the public wage bill freeze. So, Madam Chair, my question to the Prime Minister, this piece of legislation before us today, is it to be considered a first step in removing this public wage bill freeze as advised by the IMF? And Madam Chair, could it be interpreted that if a member of parliament chooses to say, I vote against this law, that they are voting against an important first step to removing this public wage bill freeze? So that is what I would like for everyone to know. Madam Chair, they go on to say, attention should be given to hiring key skill areas where positions are difficult to fill. So how is that going, Madam Chair? So they are saying, let's start taking the steps to reverse these measures, and let's start hiring. Is that happening? Is the Prime Minister and the Minister of General Affairs, who is over the hiring and so on, how is that going? Are you also following those advices and steps that the Netherlands agreed to when discussing with the IMF? Madam Chair, I understand sometimes members of parliament want to maybe portray that they care about the civil service and they want the teachers and subsidized schools and everybody to get paid. And I don't think anyone in here would disagree that we want to see these steps reversed. But Madam Chair, the most powerful thing, and anything we can use to make those steps going forward, that's where voting our conscience comes into play. Simply voting against for voting against sake is a stance that one can take. But what does that actually do to back the words that you portray? When you say you want something for the people, when you say you want something for the public, Madam Chair, if the Member of Parliament can give me a chance to speak, he had his time. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, all of the time we are talking about doing and saying that we want to do things. But our action also reflects in the way we vote. And what we believe will ultimately be good for the public, for the civil servants, for the teachers, and everyone. And that is why the most important question I want, and I will repeat again, Madam Chair, is does the Prime Minister consider this to be a very crucial, critical step in the direction of making all civil servants, all public function workers, teachers, etc., that we get to reverse these cuts, that in hindsight, everybody is starting to see, and very clearly, that this was imposed on us in order to allow us to survive through a very difficult time. But even we see the stance of the Netherlands is changing. I remember I made a bet with someone, a friendly bet, and I say, that coho, what you're going to see, the summer recess is going to come and go, and we ain't even going to get an answer from the second chamber. Because I believe even in their hearts, they know that this thing how it is can't work. But at the time, you had a different state secretary that was on a military mindset and said, this got to go no matter what. And now we're seeing a difference. We're seeing announcements that, wait a minute, no, the cohort needs to be discussed. It needs to be, I believe the prime ministers are going to come together. Now we see that there's room to be able to phase out these sort of things, pay vacation pay. So we're going in that direction. I have to wonder if some of the efforts and the clear clear status that self-determination is being at the forefront of the Netherlands having to respect that. Well, back in the day, an instruction normally coming from the CFT, by the next Friday, Aruba would have already gotten an instruction. You're seeing a completely different attitude now, where that right to self-determination is coming to play. It is in the minds of the second chamber of the kingdom government. And guess who put that at the forefront? It was this parliament. But again, Madam Chair, if the parliament wants to actually help the people of the country, we also have to act and not just speak. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. Next, we have MP Rayon Peterson. I'll give you a few minutes to set up. Yes? Okay. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A good afternoon to yourself, to the Honorable Prime Minister and her support staff, to the griffier and the Secretariat, to my honorable colleagues, and to those tuned in throughout the various media outlets. Madam Chair, a lot was said about the legality of what is transpiring right now, but I think that it's my duty to correct the MP before me, because although he had the right article in place, I believe he misinterpreted the whole article, and I would like to explain it a little bit here on the floor of Parliament. Article 50, it states that in certain cases, kan worden afgeweken, can be deviated from the budget, and then it gives those two cases. It gives, indien het langsbelang zulks acuut vordert, so to translate, if this is an acutely necessary in the national interest, and in the event of unanticipated urgent needs during a service year for which no provision is made in the budget. Onverwacht opgekomen dringende behoeften. Now, the good MP before me mentioned Lid 4, Section 4 of the same article, in which, it speaks about the Council of Ministers, given the exception, and then he speaks that this exception had to do with the acute langsbelang. But that is completely false. It actually states that it is juist alleen in onderdeel B. So if you read the article, Section 4 of Article 50, of the Ontwerplandsverordening, what was said about the Council of Ministers giving their approval, they cannot give any approval when it comes to the acute landsbelang. Because if you read Section 2 of the same article, it explains what's an acute landsbelang, the national interest. En it speaks of de omstandigheid dat de gevolgen van oorlog of oorlogsgevaar, een ramp of een buitengewoon voorval door het land moet worden opgevangen. So it's speaking about war and disasters. That is an acute landsbelang. So in light of that, through you, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the Minister if the deviation was meant to be in the case of an acute landsbelang, as per what was mentioned by the MP before me, then please, can you enlighten us as to what that landsbelang was? And if not, then I assume it would be based off of Section 1, sub B, which is the onverwacht opgekomen dringende behoeften, which I think would fit more into what the Prime Minister is doing at the moment. But therefore, through you, Madam Chair, I would also like to know what the reasoning is behind that, because that would also need to be proven. You see, it's nice to mention articles, but detail is key when it comes to dissecting national ordinances, especially when it comes to the legality of actions that still would need to be legitimized here in Parliament. Because as a good MP before me said, this is a budgetrecht. Our budget right, the most important task of Parliament, to approve, to give the executive branch, the Council of Ministers, the legitimacy to actually spend any money for the people of Sint Maarten. So in light of that, I would want those answers to you, Madam Chair. And also it was said that based on the vote, we can see who is for the people and whatnot. I personally believe that this shouldn't really matter because the people have already been paid. The payout has already been done, so to my legal opinion, it's going to be very difficult for the government to take back that money. And since we would be talking about who would actually care about the people, if there would be an issue in which the money would have to be taken back, I will personally assist all the people in St. Martin in a collective attack against the government to fight this case, because you have the right to that money, so they cannot take it back. So that fear-mongering also needs to stop, through you, Madam Chair. And lastly, Madam Chair, what I would also like to mention is, we talk a lot about voting our conscience, and the consequences thereof, and I would really hope that all of my colleagues, including our colleagues that are abroad or maybe arrived here today, would do the same, vote their conscience when it comes to the motion of no confidence this Friday. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Peterson. It appears we have come to the ending of the questions in round one. I look over to the Prime Minister. Would you like us to take a adjournment to caucus? Or yes, I'll take a 5-minute adjournment, and then we'll get back to everyone to see how the Prime Minister plans to respond to the questions posed in round one. Meeting adjourned for 5 minutes. Good afternoon, members of parliament. Welcome back. We just took a brief adjournment to allow me to caucus with the Prime Minister to decide how we move forward with the answering of the questions. I'd like to turn the floor over to the Prime Minister for her response.
Thank you,
And some
Madam Chair
remarks.
Lady. Thank you to the members of parliament who had asked for some clarification on some answers provided, as well as making some further comments, elucidation, etc., and even asking some more questions. While we don't need a whole lot of time, seeing that you do have another meeting at 2, I will ask for opportunity to come back at your earliest convenience. However, I also need to note that I believe MP Westcott Williams noted that some underlying documents that had been promised were not submitted in our haste. Those will be sent, if they haven't been sent already, by my support staff. This is the underlying document showing the agreement of the unions with the proposed way forward. Indeed, I thought in my opening statements I'd clarified exactly what led us to where we are here today, but I will take the time in my responses to further elucidate to the people of St. Martin what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we expect it to work. And also the note of a wijziging will be finalized and sent as well to the Parliament of St. Martin before the next meeting. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to handle this advice. As one of the members mentioned, we came before the recess. We'd hoped to have had it handled to alleviate that stress from the civil servants, because we're holding the days basically hostage, but also now knowing that based on what happened in Aruba, that we still have extra weight in terms of the LNT. So I would really like to see that that is also handled in Parliament as soon as possible, so that we can continue to discuss with our Kingdom partners and move forward in the best interest of alleviating the pressure where we agree to start the AFBAO. And we really need to get there for the people of St. Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for your remarks, and thank you for your presence here today. Thank you for your support. Thank you to your support staff as well. Mr. Plantain, you're watching me. Mr. Plantain and Ms. Weeks, thank you for your presence here today. Members of Parliament, thank you as well for your participation. We will then adjourn this meeting until further notice. Meeting adjourned.